Thank you for coming today. Today we will be discussing sextortion. It is a growing digital crime impacting children and adults. And to go over a bit about me, my name is Allie Hopper. I authored Florida's first anti-grooming bill and helped pass similar laws in multiple states. I testified before the U.S. Congress through the Committee on Homeland Security about child trafficking on November 19th, 2024. I'm an internationally recognized expert on human trafficking, conducted on-the-ground human trafficking research alongside my partner, Dr. Jared Sadolsky, across the U.S., in Central America and South America to gain a deeper understanding of trafficking. Lastly, I am the president of Guard Against Trafficking, a nonprofit co-founded by myself and Dr. Sadolsky to combat exploitation through research, education, and advocacy. Today, our presentation will cover understanding the threat of sextortion, the psychological and emotional impact, and then prevention and protection strategies. So what is sextortion? Sextortion is defined as a form of online exploitation involving coercion for explicit content. The perpetrators threaten exposure unless victims comply, and the targets typically include minors, young adults, and vulnerable individuals, as well as adults. Now, here are a few examples of what sextortion looks like. We posted a few screenshots of messages that would be shared by a typical sextortion situation. A couple of the things are sent the pic through that other app like you wanted. I saw it. Now, if you don't pay me $500, I'll send your naked pic to your friends and family. You have 30 seconds. And so that is an exploitation for money. In other circumstances, there can be an exploitation for more material and resulting sometimes in sex trafficking. Another example is I know that where you go to school, you know that I can send this to everyone, you know I can ruin your life. So these are just a few examples. I have a video if the audio decides to participate.
All right, today's date's November the 12th.
Can you hear this?
The time now is approximately 7.
Can you hear this, Teresa?
28 in the morning.
Yes, it's running.
Detective Joe Phillips
Okay.
with Virginia Beach Police.
Do you remember that time period?
Yes.
Can you start to tell the jury what happened?
I had, like, a friend request from this Steve Crofton guy.
Prior to that date, had you ever had contact with a Steve Crofton?
No.
For the first time in history, we're letting strangers interact with our kids in the back of our car, in their bedrooms, in their homes.
That online environment has just created this access to children that was never there before.
Physiologically, they don't understand who is out there and what people are capable of.
It's been called a new form of sexual assault, online sextortion.
For each aside, the increase that we've seen is definitely sextortion.
Sextortion is probably the fastest growing crime in the world.
That's right, sextortion attempts are skyrocketing.
You know, we see cases come in for children as young as 8 years old, 9 years old. We're talking elementary school children.
As a predator, you can actually create an online profile that matches the preferences of that child.
He got information from our chats through my computer, information about my mom, about my sister. He had Google images of my home.
From 16 years ago to today, there is no mold. Anybody from any walk of life could be involved in this. I mean, we've had doctors and police and clergy.
Simply the fact of who the offender was very shocking in this case.
We intercepted a letter he wrote to the Chinese embassy in Washington. If they would break him out, he would give them All the information on the F-18.
When you talk to me, please don't lie to me. You're a grown man, you're an officer in the Navy.
These grown men are going after these young girls, and they try to kill them. Might not be in their intention, but they're killing them. And we have to stop it.
I would literally do anything to save one. There's so many kids out there that need saving that there's just not enough of us to do it.
So that was just a example that was put online with numerous news examples and reports from upper levels in government reporting on this very issue that we're discussing today, highlighting the apparent need to address this issue. Why sextortion is a serious crime? The cases are increasing worldwide, and they are being reported more and more. There are severe psychological, emotional, and social, and oftentimes financial impacts on these victims. And there are strong links to trafficking, cybercrime, and organized exploitation. How does sextortion happen? It often happens through social media, gaming platforms, messaging apps. Now, that's not a limited and all-encompassing list, but these are the primary arenas that sextortion can happen. It happens through the use of fake profiles, hacking, and deepfake technology, which is only increased by the use of AI. And it does involve psychological manipulation, coercion, and then later threats. Who are the victims? Anyone can be a victim of sextortion. It can be male, female, it can be adult, minor. As far as adults, approximately 1 in 7 adults have experienced threats to share their intimate images, underscoring the widespread nature of sextortion among adults. But a majority of them are minors and young adults. The average age of a target is 15 years of age. Girls are targeted in 76% of sextortion cases, while boys are targeted in about 11%. And the range for girls fell in a larger range for age, ranging from age 9 to age 17, whereas boy victims tended to range in the age of 12 to 17. And there is a serious lack in reporting. Often it's due to the fact that the victims feel shame and they are afraid to report. Here is an example of the story of Teresa Flores. Another quick video, but it is really relevant to what we are discussing today and really important to hear
human trafficking
from a person who has had this happen to themselves here in the United States.
Human trafficking is happening in every zip code, and mostly to children. My dad worked for a big corporation. He would get promoted and we would move every 2 years. We moved to a very rich suburb of Detroit. It was February of my sophomore year of high school. I had a crush on this guy. He said, "Would you like a ride home from school?" And I was so naive. I really thought he was gonna take me home. He gave me a pop that was laced with drugs, and then I got raped. But he said, they took these pictures. We're gonna show these to your dad. We're gonna show these to his boss, and you have to earn them back. And they would drive me all around the Detroit area. I would have to service anywhere from 4 to 10 men. My worst night was being left for dead in a Detroit motel. I thought this was the end of the road. It was really a miracle that I got saved out of that.
At 14, I had been sold numerous.
This is just one example of sextortion that happened that led to trafficking. This happened in the United States. This happened to a middle income family, normal. There were no known issues within the family. Both parents were affluent. They had stable jobs. They had a stable household. And in a moment's notice, Teresa Flores, due to a circumstance beyond her control, was sextorted and then through that was trafficked. And these are the examples. These are the voices that we want to highlight when we discuss issues like this. These are the real faces of real victims that have been fallen victim to this crime. Now let's talk a bit about statistics. In 2023, although this was 2 years ago, NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, received 26,718 reports of sextortion, a substantial increase from 10,731 reports in 2022. Now, these are reports. A lot of these victims, a lot of these crimes go unreported, but for the ones that did report, in a 1-year analyzation of the crime more than doubled. And this is within a 1-year time frame. An estimated 4.7% of children across the selected world regions have been victims of online sexual exploitation. So it isn't just a crime that happens in the United States, it happens across the world. And it's really important to take note of that. From 2021 in October to March of 2023, the FBI and Homeland Security investigations received over 13,000 reports of online financial sextortion of minors. The sextortion involved at least 12,600 victims, primarily boys, and led to at least 20 suicides. So not only are these children being victimized, they're being traumatized, they're being manipulated and coerced. Many times, if it's not caught, it does lead to suicide. There are many apps that parents and adults should know about, not just parents, adults. It is really important to go over some of these apps in general. There's an app called Calculator Percent, one of several secret apps used to hide photos, videos, files, and browser history. This is an app on your phone that appears like a calculator app. It is the second one in on the top, and it can be used to hide things. Whisper. It's an anonymous social platform that encourages users to share secrets with one another. The app also reveals the user's location to allow people to meet up. Social media, apps like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, they are popular social media apps, but they allow users to create stories, send pictures and videos, and there are functions on those apps that can make those videos, those pictures disappear, or so the teenager or user thinks. They don't often disappear if they get screenshot by the other party that is receiving those pictures, those videos. It also shares your location. Users have reported explicit content and cyberbullying on this app. Now we have games and gaming apps. You have apps like Discord, which allows users to chat with both friends and strangers through voice, video, and text while playing video games. Users have reported racial slurs and explicit content on the app. You have a game like Roblox. Many elementary school kids are playing Roblox. It's an online game with a chat function, which opens users up to solicitation from sexual predators that are also on the app and have access to that chat. There's messaging apps like WhatsApp and Kik. It's an app that allows users to communicate through text, calls, and video chats worldwide, and they can bypass traditional text messaging features. So for parents that think that they can look at their phone bill, there are apps that can circumvent what appears on a phone bill. Omegle. Now, I've heard this app has been taken down, but there is a replica of it with a slightly different name, very close to the original. Social app that allows users to video chat privately or in a group. Child pornography has been linked to this app per authorities. And then there's dating apps, which allow users to chat, share videos, share photos, and the apps are intended for adults only. However, kids have been known to create fake profiles and falsify their ages. So these are a few of the many apps that are out there, and they're constantly changing. Apps are constantly getting uploaded and updated, and games are constantly hitting the market with added features like chat. That's not even including 3D gaming platforms like the Oculus. When you start going into a 3D virtual world or a virtual reality, and that ability to be able to have interaction with online users, of which they appear as an avatar. That avatar can be created in any which way with any physical characteristics that that user wants. So these are the things that we as parents, as adults, as community members, as educators, and as leaders need to be aware about. Who are the perpetrators? Perpetrators are, they can be individual predators, online strangers. They can be even more sophisticated, ranging into organized criminal networks and cyber gangs. There are domestic and or foreign actors seeking financial gain or exploitation. We're going to look at a quick case study of the predator Michael Lucas Chandler. This was back in 2015 in the state of Florida. This individual was 26 years old, used the internet to victimize nearly 350 teenage girls. At least 240 of his victims have not been identified to this day. He pretended to be a 15 or 16-year-old boy on social media. He would ask the girl to expose herself and then record it and then threaten her. All of his victims were girls from the ages of 13 to 18, and he used over 100 different identities. This is one example of a predator that exists in the sextortion world. There are characteristics based on Dr. Sadulski and I's interview with a former sex trafficker. What he said was they are very likely to use sextortion as a form of coercion. Those that are predators can be both male and female. They tend to blend in with everyday people as they balance two lives. They are initially very soft-spoken, kind, and cater to the person's interests that they're speaking to. In their minds, they believe they are businessmen and women, that they are just making money. And they believe they are smarter than most criminals. These are the words, these are the insights of an individual that is a former sex trafficker. There are various psychological and emotional impacts of this horrific crime. The immediate effects are fear, anxiety, shame, depression. Long-term, there's traumatic long-term effects like PTSD, withdrawal, trust issues. And there are cases of self-harm and suicide that are linked to sextortion. Digital safety best practices. Keep social media accounts private. Absolutely, to the best of your ability. And if you have to have a public-facing platform for a reason such as a child needs to be accessible to recruiters, make sure that you have a personal account that is private and a public-facing account that is very limited and not used for chatting, only for the reasons that you would be using it for, like sports recruiters or any other type of recruiters. And make sure as a parent or guardian that you have access to that public profile at all times, whether it's the app downloaded on your phone or your tablet, or you have the login. Use two-factor authentication so that your accounts can't get taken over. and be cautious with online interactions and unknown requests. Parental and community involvement. Notice how I also mentioned community involvement, because it's not just a responsibility of the parents or guardians. It is also a responsibility of the community to ensure that our youngest, most vulnerable are protected. Number one, encourage open conversations about online safety. Warn of the dangers of sharing images and videos. Explain that children can come to you regardless of what has occurred, and warn that criminals can hack phones and computers, and virtually any device that is connected to the internet can be hacked, to include home security cameras, baby monitors, etc. Number two, monitor digital activities responsibly. Monitor social media and internet use. Spot check phones and computers and confirm those privacy settings. In some households, it has been discussed that parents don't want to come off as a helicopter parent, but when you are doing the due diligence to ensure that the threats that could impact your children, that could impact your household and your community, those are not circumstances of helicopter parenting. No different than making sure your child is aware of the white van that could pull up, or the stranger that would be asking them if they would like to see his dog. Number three, educate youth on recognizing and reporting threats, making sure that they feel comfortable that they're not going to get in trouble, because first and foremost, the issue needs to be dealt with, and that the trust was there and it was built to be able to handle the problem before it gets worse. There is a role for schools, both elementary, middle, high school, college, and any higher education, and law enforcement. Schools and communities can create a culture of safety and awareness, and schools should implement cyber safety education. It is really, really important, especially when we think young adults and adults may or may not know the issue. But when you know that 1 in 7 adults are falling victim to this crime, it means that there is no amount of education that can be too much to address this issue. Law enforcement, they face challenges in tracking perpetrators. There are issues with tracking them with the technology that is able to mask their identity, mask their location, VPNs. There are circumstances where a lot of these perpetrators aren't even in the United States. So there are situations where law enforcement does struggle to track and arrest these perpetrators. But there is a need for proactive intervention and victim support. We need a route for stronger policies, advocating for stricter penalties, increased funding for cyber crime investigations, and an international cooperation to combat online exploitation. When you have a circumstance where it's an international crime syndicate, you need relationships with those countries to be able to extradite those individuals in a prompt fashion and be able to stop the exploitation before it continues on. What to do if a minor is a victim of sextortion? First and foremost, you contact your local law enforcement. Additionally, NCMEC does have a resource called Take It Down for minors. It is a free service to help you remove or stop the online sharing of nude, partially nude, or sexually explicit images or videos. The service is for image and videos taken of children under 18 years of age. It is a great resource. And a quick story, Dr. Sadowski and I were at a summit giving a very similar presentation on sextortion. We alerted the community on this crime to the point where a mother felt compelled to check her minor's technology and had quickly identified that that minor, her child, was being sextorted and was within a short period of time of committing suicide. So these conversations are real, they have lasting impacts, and we need to ensure that they have lasting positive impacts to be able to save the lives of children, young adults, vulnerable adults, and adults across the nation and across the world. There's a quick how-to guide, how NCMEC takes it down. I put this in here if someone wants to take a quick snapshot of how that works. If not, you can go to takeitdown.ncmec.org and they will walk you through how this process works. What you can do, you can educate yourself and others about sextortion, and attending this speaker series is the first step. So I appreciate everyone that attended. You can support victims and report crimes, and you can advocate for stronger digital protections and policies. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that you touched on is that some of these people, these perpetrators, are not even in the United States, yet targeting US citizens. There's a group out of Nigeria that not only are they responsible for targeting children in the United States, but they actually create how-to guides on how to sextort children, and they post those guides on social media, on the internet. They're actually very common. So it's, it really is, to Allie's point, it is the FBI has recognized it as the fastest online crime toward children in the United States. And it's a mess. If your child has access to the internet, your child's a potential target.
Well, I will save Teresa's voice and talk a bit. This is Dr. Beeman. One of the things that amazes me, because I'm an old person, is why would these young people even take these photos? And so it goes back to sort of their own self-worth, their self-dignity. And I'm wondering if you have any like in-school interventions that sort of work on the individuals, both male and female, so that they don't even take these pictures in the first place, and that they're suspicious of people who want them to. Thoughts?
I mean, that's a very valid question. There have been numerous psychological reviews on this very issue. When you take a society that is largely living and utilizing the digital resources at hand, you start to become desensitized to the possible dangers around you when you're constantly on the internet or constantly using technology in any form or manner. It can be rooted to a confidence issue. However, when you notice that adults, 1 in 7 adults, are getting caught up in a very similar crime, knowing that there are those risks, knowing that most of those adults have a fully developed frontal lobe, there is a serious gap in understanding and a serious lack of understanding, not only the technology, but the risk of the internet and those images and videos being on the internet forever. And we've communicated this through various campaigns. There's been various campaigns talking about the longevity of a digital footprint, the images, the videos, the accounts, our personas on the internet. But for some reason, there seems to be a lack of awareness on the threat levels. And so when you see adults that are just as vulnerable to getting extorted through sexual means and oftentimes more in a financial manner, it just leads to an understanding that there is a major lack of understanding about the crime, about the perpetrators, and that there needs to be more thought and solutioning around how we can fix this, because the technology isn't going away. If anything, it's going to only make it easier for these bad actors to infiltrate, to make AI personas, to make virtual reality personas. So when you have these circumstances, there needs to be consistent conversation around it.
Yeah, and as you pointed out very well at the beginning, a community that intervenes. You know, maybe it isn't being brought up in school, but maybe the coach, maybe the houses of worship, maybe the everybody, you know, so we just get the word out.
Well, and there is a need for stronger policy around the platforms that hold this material. There are situations where platforms have received reports that this is graphic child imagery, and it takes them a very long time to remove that imagery. And by the time that they do, it has been shared hundreds of thousands of times. So while they remove the imagery, the CSAM material, child sexual abuse material, it has already circulated through the internet. So we need a tighter collaboration with these technology providers to protect children, and then reassess how to protect, the larger community, but children at a minimum. But thank you for those questions, Nina. Those were great.
Well, I'll jump in since no one else is. And this may be a little off topic, but I think it actually feeds into the sickness. But I was listening the other day to some commentators that were talking about the amount of pornography that young people see. And so they expect sex to be sort of, I'll just say, a negative experience. And so many young women are not wanting to date men because they see sex as what you're just talking about, something that will exploit them, something that is dangerous, something that is not loving and kind and romantic like the romance novels, etc. And so what has happened to our culture that you have to fear intimacy because it could lead to this? So could you comment on that?
Yeah, and so I'd be able to only do it anecdotally out of my own personal experience and my scope of my interactions. But what I've seen is that there is a decline in the understanding of not only, like you mentioned, confidence levels, but as a culture and as a society. When you have the advocates, adult men and adult women advocating for sites like OnlyFans, and where females are going on there as a sense of empowerment, and they're showing their bodies willingly, and they're denigrating themselves to be able to make money by doing horrible things, men and women, on the internet, which they know is forever. You know that you have a cultural problem, you have a morality problem, where we need to address it and assess it at a younger age and stage. Technology is here to stay. I have children of my own, and they have very limited access to technology, but not just a limit. They know why. There is a underlying reason, and they know the reasons. They have been explained the reasons. And so I think that we need to have these conversations with our youth so that it doesn't present itself in their young adult and adult lives in the way that we're seeing now. All right, Teresa, did we have anything else?
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say or ask? I do.
I'd like to make a few comments.
Wonderful.
Being that I brought up 4 children, and we were always together and interacting together. Of course, my daughter is Allie. I think the breakdown of the family, the religion, all of that the two parents that are out working all the time, where, you know, when I grew up, my mom was home. Okay. The fact that there's no dinner time anymore, that was replaced by sports and everything else, but there's no dinner time with the kids anymore. So they have nothing to do. They don't, I find now that just having the kids go outside to play is kind of scary. So you keep them inside, but there's nothing to do. We used to go outside, play softball, kickball, police tag, you know. Now they're on the internet. And the internet is a bad place to be, but you're not giving the kids anything else to do. And the parents are too busy, I think, to interact with their kids. And I think there's something, we need to fix that part to help get these kids off the internet. Just having them to safeguard your house and keeping them off the internet when you can go anywhere else to get on the internet. It's so easy to get on the internet these days that you don't have to be home to get on the internet. The cell phones are a problem, you know, and every kid has a cell phone. You know, do they really need cell phones? I feel like you just need to get these kids off the internet. They can be on a computer, but why do they need the internet? And then the school came in and they wanted to use computers. Then they needed to have the internet for that. It just, I just think our society has gone along and almost, it was a perfect storm of why this is happening today. Any comments to that?
I agree. I mean, I think it is a multifaceted approach. I mean, you have technology and we have a society that has been very reluctant to understand and recognize and address the problems and the risks that come along with technology. We are very careful and cautious about giving our young adults, our teenagers, a car. We make them go through driver's ed. We make them commit to a certain amount of hours driving on the road. And even then, you know, those circumstances are scary, but there isn't that same mindset when you're talking about the internet, which can be actually a more dangerous vehicle. Just like a car can be used for positive, it can also be used to where you end up in a harmful situation. And so the internet is a tool. We need to learn how to use the tool, respect the tool, and use the tool, gain access to the tool at an appropriate age, much like a car. So it's challenging as a parent when you hear other parents say, well, I have a very mature 8-year-old. The law doesn't care if you have a mature 8-year-old and you think they're ready to drive a car. The law is the law. They're able to drive a car at a minimum of age 15 for a permit and 16 for a license. So giving the children, the minors, a tool at any age with little to no education on it, both positive and negative, the risks associated, you are giving a car to a child without explaining the risks, without going through the proper protocols and training them on how to use it, and then having those conversations with them that if something occurs, if they see something, that they need to say something.
That's a good point. The only thing is that you're talking about children where even as adults, getting on the computer and what comes up on the computer to entice you to get into sites maybe you wouldn't have been in had you not been on the computer, even as an adult, with, you know, those sites, which destroys marriages. You're trying to say to a child, here you have something that even adults have a hard time controlling themselves, and we're expecting the children to control themselves.
Exactly. I mean, it's a perfect example, like the car situation. You can have teenagers that get into a car and get into accidents because they're very unaware of what the risks are. They haven't had as much driving experience, but then you have adults that also are prone to risks if they're not careful. They get lax. And so much like a car, the internet is a vehicle that can be used for good, but can also harm people, both the driver, the passengers, and anyone else that the car may interact with or come into contact with if the proper precautions aren't taken. So even then, even if you have all of the safety measures in place, things can still happen. Hacking can still occur where you weren't even aware, you weren't participating in these nefarious acts. But the knowledge and understanding of what to do then when you are being extorted, when you have these circumstances of material, knowing that it's not going to get better by paying a fee, it's not going to go away, knowing that these bad actors that continue to exploit individuals have no care for your concern and your feelings. And so knowing that law enforcement and that route is what needs to happen to be able to help mitigate some of these larger circumstances. But when you have adults falling victim to extortion and not just paying out financially, but then are able to be controlled in their decisions and what they do, we have a large problem. So it just takes more education. It takes more collaboration with law enforcement. It takes more collaboration with lawmakers. It takes more collaboration with the community. So, and Aspen University was great in putting on the speaker series to begin to educate the community in a way like this. So thank you.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, for your comments. And Jeremy has his hand up. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Hi, yes. So on the topic what you were just speaking on in the education part of this, I think it's extremely important on many angles, many fronts, because our youth is being utilized in many different ways. I'm sure you guys have probably heard about the swatting incidents that's taking place on conservatives. For those that don't know, I'm a researcher and I'm involved with Project Milk Carton. Is pretty much what we do is to educate on all these types of issues. In my research and looking into that, there are people and entities online that are 100% using our youth, grooming them through gaming platforms, online for TikTok, and so on, to get these kids to call in these SWATs, bomb threats, and so forth onto individuals, not knowing the implications. For example, there was a kid in Florida back in December of 2023 that was caught up in calling in over 300 SWATs, I think it was, across the country and in Canada. And they were 14 years old and was getting paid in crypto to do these SWATs. And they were not only charged in Florida, but in each state the SWAT was called into, and they were all charged as an adult. That at the age of 14, these kids think they're just, doing something that's funny that earns them, money, but not understanding the repercussions or the consequences of their actions. And now these two 14-year-olds are charged as an adult with, I think it was over 14 felonies. So this type of education, I wanted to say, is extremely important to get out to not just the youth, but the adults as well, that these types of things are taking place.
And Jeremy, can you just explain to everybody what swatting is? I'm not sure that everybody's going to know what that term means.
Yeah, absolutely. So swatting is where, and in this instance, these online kids are playing online games and somebody's in the chat and they're saying, hey, somebody should call in this SWAT onto this school or this individual. And then they do this. And the SWAT is, they call law enforcement in that area and say, so-and-so just murdered his family and he's holding his wife hostage and he's going to kill himself and kill her and kill himself. So that law enforcement's on high alert, sends in SWAT to assess the situation and putting lives in danger. There's multiple reports that these instances has cost people their lives. So it's a very dangerous situation. And again, the child, whoever calling in the SWAT, if there is an incident where someone gets killed, they also get charged with that death as well.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, you are absolutely correct. These online platforms aren't just being used to manipulate our youth to send pictures and videos. They are manipulating our youth and impacting our youth in more ways than that to do things that they wouldn't normally do, or encourage them, or start trends that they think are funny or popular. That And I know that you had a personal experience with that. But when you have these trends that are starting to get popular on the internet, led by influencers, and then you start entering in some of these applications and having access to bad actors mixed with other children that may be participating in the same thing and not think that it's a big deal, you're opening up a large door to a lot of issues without understanding it yourself. So when you allow your child to go on Discord, but you've never been on Discord, you don't understand Discord, that's a problem. When you allow your child to get a TikTok account, but you've never had a TikTok account, you're not on TikTok, you don't know how it works, you haven't done any research to find out if there are protocols and processes that you can implement to ensure that it's a more safe application or be able to use it safely, then us as adults aren't doing our due diligence. So with simple example with my children are able to play Minecraft, which, like Roblox, has an ability for that chat function. Doing our research, though, we were able to find out how to disable that function, how to disable that chat function, and make sure that that is not accessible unless a password is typed in by an adult. So when adults are more involved with their families, and something like Sandra had highlighted, when they're not aware, when they're busy, trying to make ends meet and trying to put food on the table, but they're not paying attention to what their children are doing, you might be helping your family in the short term, but ignoring situations that could present a long-term problem.
Yes, absolutely. And if I may, to the statement you just made, about the pictures and the obviously we know about the grooming that takes place, online. That's one of the avenues that they do take. In the instance that I was mentioning earlier with the two 14-year-olds that were calling in the SWATs, on their phones, they found there was SRA, satanic ritual abuse, taking place, and murders. These kids had, were watching murders. They were sending videos of murders. They had child pornography, a lot of this. And what they do is, they start by sending and getting these kids involved with this type of rhetoric, and getting them into that type of thing, and then sometimes leading to blackmailing them. Hey, we'll show your parents if you don't do this, this, and that, or paying them in crypto, and they're just involved and overwhelmed in that life. It messes with them mentally, because face it, 14-year-olds are at that development stage where they're very impressionable, and parents are not aware of this, and it's extremely important that we educate on this particular topic. And I could take it really deep if we really wanted to. FBI just released documents where they were looking into Michael Aquerino and this Temple of Set, and they interviewed like 100 kids that were involved with this and found no malice. However, if you look into that, it's another form that leads right into all of this type of grooming that's weaponized against our kids.
Absolutely. And I believe the next speaker series, Teresa, if I'm correct, is discussing grooming. And so it'll be interesting now that we've discussed sextortion, going back and actually describing and going into detail what the grooming process is, what it looks like, what it does, what gateways, dangerous pathways does it open it up an individual and adult, both child and adult to. And so understanding sextortion is great, but really where we need to understand sextortion is we need to understand the grooming process and that manipulation that takes place, that coercion, because that can take place on the internet and that can take place in person. So understanding that coercion component of sextortion within grooming will help us understand crimes like sextortion and just situations and relationships in general, whether they involve the internet or not. If you are able to identify coercion, manipulation techniques, that'll help navigate future situations and circumstances more effectively.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and talk here. We'll see if it works. I understand so easily a couple of things. How the comment about, Allie, what you made, how your kids have TikTok, and that's TikTok now, and it's all of these other apps that I don't know. But when my children, who are now in their 30s, gonna be, one is 30, the others are upper 20s, they were on MySpace. That was one of the very first ones. And as parents, we hovered a little bit. And they could be on their MySpace. They were, 11, 12, 13, around that age. They could be on their MySpace on the family computer. Nobody had laptops. They did not have phones yet. And in the computer room with the computer door opened. But we still had no idea what MySpace was. I still to this day have no idea what MySpace was. I didn't spend the time to, like you said, research what MySpace was, what they were actually doing on MySpace, who they were interacting with on MySpace, who their friends were on MySpace, or if that was even a thing. I had no idea. Who they were following, who was following them. How did that work? Now, now after all of the other apps came out, now I understand a little bit more about that, and they're adults now, but how easily even the most hovering parent who thought they were doing the right thing wouldn't have been enough. I think that your insight into the problem is that the parents don't understand the apps and how they work and how somebody can hack and how somebody can pretend to be a 12-year-old boy and make a MySpace page and then ask to be friends. And then pretty soon, there you go, you're down the rabbit hole and you don't know it. You just don't know it. The girls are saying, two of them are girls. The girls are saying, oh, Jerry from the other junior high, I don't know who he is, but he goes to Simley. That could have been a 26-year-old man that was pretending to be Jerry from the other junior high. And we're like, oh, that was nice. You're making friends from the other school. Like, we're completely oblivious as parents. And I think that's a major problem. I do think that is a major problem that needs to be continually looked at, the education piece of that. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, are we seeing that because, you know, you're bringing to light a lot of the sex trafficking and the sextortion and grooming and all of that. Are we seeing that this is, and then Nina brought up a really good point, which Nina had to leave, but Nina brought up a really good point about girls not even with all of the information about the sex trafficking and just the sexual stuff that is going on, the sexual deviant stuff, the sexual aggression that is going on in the culture of men, that young girls are afraid of getting into relationships and seeing sex as bad and not wanting to, and are there, I personally feel like it's fear. But do you see that males are more of the perpetrators in these situations, or do you see that females are just as equally evil and part of this ring of trafficking and sex exploitation than males are?
So historically, and I think, and Jared can correct me if I'm incorrect, but in more of the Hollywood sense, it's always depicted as a male perpetrator. But we have found female perpetrators. Now, there needs to be an understanding between the female psyche and the male psyche. As a young boy, they tend to struggle more with reporting than females do, and females already struggle to report. But for a young male, they are way less likely to report. As far as seeing female predators, they are definitely out there. I was doing research for some report that I was looking at last week, and there were 3 female perpetrators within within neighboring counties in our area, of female teachers that were inappropriately sexting their students, using Snapchat to communicate with their students, sending pictures. I believe one of the female teachers was just arrested on about 30 counts of improper, harmful communication and conduct with minors, which led to actual sexual assault of some of these minors. I hesitate to say that one demographic is more targeted than the other, because I think young boys are less likely to report. However, I will say that female perpetrators, there are also male on male perpetrators. So there are male perpetrators that will victimize young boys. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it really is a mix of the bad actors, male and female, and the victims, male and female. And that's what we see in the trafficking space as well. The females in trafficking are more likely to recruit. They're more likely to recruit young girls and boys to the life, which is astonishing to most women because you just can't fathom that disregard for that motherly instinct when you as a woman are able to recruit a young boy or girl into this lifestyle. But I think that there needs to be an understanding that there are no boundaries to the victims. They can come from a variety of socioeconomic situations, racial and ethnic backgrounds, various countries, and so can the bad actors. So it really is a crime that we need to understand, because it can be masked as your neighbor. It can be masked as a teacher, a stand-up community leader. It really is coming down to the psychology component of understanding manipulation and coercion.
That's absolutely a great way to end today with that statement, and positively appropriate for anyone who is watching the recording, anyone who's listening to you, Jared and Jeremy out there fighting this fight, that it is not just it could have been one of my daughters. And I come from a good home. My daughters come from a good home. We're, upper middle class. We thought we were doing everything right when it came to social media, when social media broke back then, and we probably weren't. So I want to thank everyone for coming today for another great discussion, as we always have around Allie's topic, and invite everyone to come back on April 8th when she talks about a vital component of this, of how grooming occurs and how to protect against it, because that is something that we need to also discuss and continue to discuss, and educate parents, so that we can have the whole community wrapped around this topic in order to fight the fight. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Allie, again for today, and hope to see you again on April 8th. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.